Welcome to our panel on new frontiers in asset management. And today we have a great group of titans in the area of asset ownership. The word's been used, but what we're really going to be talking about today is really in context of the theme of innovation with the conference. How are things changing for the largest asset owners in the world? And we're going to explore really what's changing, what's different. Much less so about the markets and more about how you're dealing with a structural change in the investing environment, not just here in the United States, but across the globe. So to start out with an intro, starting my far right, we're honored to have Chris Ailman, the Chief Investment Officer of California State Teachers Retirement System, which manages over $200 billion for its beneficiaries. To my immediate right, Jagdeep Bachher, the Chief Hero, excuse me.
I don't have a turban.
Hero. The CIO of the Government Pension Investment Fund of Japan with $1.3 trillion under management. To my immediate left, Carrie, Thome, the Director of Investments of the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, managing $3 billion for its beneficiaries. And finally, Jagdeep Bachher, this Chief Investment Officer of the University of California Regents Fund with $98 billion under management. So I thought the best way to start off today was really just to allow everybody to talk a bit about their business objectives, and in the context of a changing environment, how's that really causing them to think differently about the process of managing their assets. So if I can, I'll start with Chris.
Thank you. Well, and I appreciate you guys coming. I know there are a lot of competing panels, so. But I think you actually have a really interesting set of the four of us, because we've all got slightly different objectives and obviously very different size funds. CalSTRS represents the public school teachers in the state of California, 850,000 members. We're a very old plan. We're about 103 years old. We've crossed 200 billion. We have a 30 to 40 year investment horizon and an unfunded liability, so we're only about 62% funded. Obviously in this state that gets lots of publicity and lots of focus on a public defined benefit plan. But I often remind people, take a look at your mortgage and how much of your mortgage is unfunded. It's a long stream benefit payment. So the biggest change to us in the last couple of years is our board has lowered the investment assumption from a decade ago, 8.5 to 8, and now more recently 7.5 down to 7.25, and eventually 7. So it puts pressure on the contributions. The investment portfolio has really not reacted to that. It's reacted more to the decline in U.S. interest rates and the fact that we've been in a 32-year bull market in fixed income that we thought even a couple of years ago was coming to an end. So we've adjusted our asset allocation to where we're now only about 15% in fixed income, and we're going to grow a 9% allocation to what we call risk mitigating strategies, which is really a way to, again, add diversification to the portfolio to reduce that big weighting. We're always going to have around an 80% weighting to what I call growth or GDP type linked assets. So as a public plan, we're under lots of pressure. We feel like we walk around with a target on our back all the time. But when you look at the public school teachers, not surprising, there is some turnover in those first few years of people being a teacher, but if they stick around for about 5 years, on average, they're going to stay for their entire career. The average retiree for us has been teaching for 29 years. Their pension benefit is actually very, what I would consider meager, but reasonable. They're not in Social Security, so they don't have that. We're the only fixed benefit they get when they retire. And the interesting challenge that I have is that California teachers, if they live to the age of 60, they live longer than any other population in America. On average, we've actually got 350 retirees that are over 100 years old. on our payroll. But you think about it, they're predominantly women, they're non-smokers, they tend to eat healthy, and they live in a very nice environment. So different structure, interesting portfolios in terms of probably shooting for the same rough risk and return, but we all go about it in different ways. And then the tiny fund on the panel.
Yeah, how about your
Right.
your approach?
Well, GPIF stands for Government Pension Investment Fund. So a lot of people misunderstand that we manage the pension for public, employees in the public sector. But we are a sort of social security fund. So and we are designed as the buffer fund for the Japanese aging society can go through the transition into much more younger age pyramid into the future. So now we have about $1.4 trillion. Can be 1.3 or 1.5 depending upon the Trump, the policy and the exchange market, which are going to be called to fill the difference between annual contribution and annual benefit payment. So we are designed as the part of a 100-year sustainable public pension scheme, and our investment time horizon is 25 years. So we are very long-term investor, and as well as we are probably textbook definition of universal owner. We own like 5,000 companies across the different capital market, and quite a significant part of our portfolio is managed passively. So we really own the global capital market in a way, and so we have been spending a lot of time to make sure that the whole approach will be aiming at to optimize whole investment chain, because we realize that we cannot really make our return superb just by picking the best managers. It's too big to create enough alpha. So we can talk about this later, but we have very passive, and also we outsource actually 100% of our equity investment to external managers for a reason. So we have different approaches, but we have some common issues to discuss. I'm really looking forward to discussing.
I do want to come back to that because I do have a question whether asset managers survive or not.
Yeah.
So we'll come back to that.
Right.
Carrie, tell us about the Wisconsin Alumni Research Fund.
Okay, thank you. And it's been really a lot of fun and a privilege to be on this panel with these distinguished CIOs. The Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, we're based in Madison, Wisconsin. We're a 90-year-old organization. We celebrated our 90th year last year. No one would really know what we are. At yesterday's breakfast, I explained. So for alumni, we were started by 9 alumni. I'm not the Alumni Association. WIAF is affiliated with the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So a lot of people know us because we're the technology transfer office for the university. Back in 1925, they had a successful invention, which is what launched the foundation. Back then, the university didn't want to have to own the intellectual property. So 9 alumni started the foundation. They decided to invest the money, and that's where we are today. So for us, $3 billion feels like a lot until you sit up here with, at first I thought Chris was impressive, and then I met Hiro and the trillions, and it's sort of daunting. And it's been fascinating to sort of talk through on the calls as to what everyone does. So for us, our objective is to support research at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Madison, for those of you who don't know, is a large land grant university. Typically, I think we fell to the top 6, but we're typically in the top 1 through 5 of beneficiaries of NIH, NSF funding with $1 billion of research. WIAF's money is important because it's the money that doesn't come with a lot of strings. It can be used for fellowships, fund research projects that are what you would be able to do if you were trying to get a grant. It enables a lot of grants. And so that's what we do. So our gift that we give annually funds the university, as well as it covers sometimes tech transfer can be a lumpy business, the operations of running the tech transfer office. That is what we do. Our objective is to grow the fund so we can continue to increase that gift. We used to have a few years ago just a standard kind of gift that grew, and we moved to a percent-based gift a few years back. That allowed us to give more money, but it also came at a time where it was probably less good for the university to have the variability into it. So for us, that's one of the things we keep into consideration when we try to set the asset allocation. For us, we try to implement by, just trying to seek as much diversification. That's probably what makes us unique. We follow sort of, if people are familiar with Bridgewater, the all-weather approach with an alpha overlay. So we're trying to find the most efficient, lowest fee way to get our market exposures. We usually ourselves refer to that as the beta portfolio internally. And then we have the alpha portfolio that's where the tactical bets, if you're suggesting that, are made. We seek an actively managed hedge funds. There's about 15 managers in there. And we don't attempt to time the markets. We leave that to the alpha portfolio, and we're just trying to seek to continue to grow that gift to support the research, which is so consistent with everything you hear today, because it's WARF's mission overall to move the innovations from that research out into the broader world to help humanity.
Great, thank you. Well, Jagdeep, please tell us a little bit about UC Regents.
Thank you, Tom. Can I get a show of hands? How many people here are students of the University of California, alumni, faculty, staff, family members?
Yeah, come on, man. It's a big deal.
Excellent, good. Well, it's a little hard to exactly pinpoint how many there are with the lights on us, but there's 1.7 million living alumni at the UC. So thank you to all of you for making the university a great institution.
Yeah, I was going to ask, wait, you're not going to hit us all up for alumni contributions, are you?
Somebody's at the end of the door there. They can handle that part of it. But a large collection of people that really contribute to the well-being of the future of the university. 250,000 students, 300,000 staff and faculty, 10 campuses, 5 medical centers, 3 national labs for energy, and quite a wide footprint of agriculture and natural resources across the province, across the state of California. So it's a large research institution here in the United States, and certainly in size and scale globally. I have the privilege of being able to manage what is called the Office of the CIO. What makes us a little bit different is that we have the responsibility for the defined benefit plan, so about 500,000 active and retired members. But we also manage $10 billion in an endowment for future generations. The working capital for the university, that's another $15 billion, and our captive insurance business. And when you put all those things together, we have different clients, different objectives, different liabilities, so to speak. So how we invest is really a function of meeting our clients' needs at the end of the day. And I think we're all going to get into variations of what that looks like. The key, I think, to all of us is we've also been around for 149 years. And when you're a CIO sitting in a job, you realize you're not going to be in the job for 149 years in the future. So whatever you do, you want to adapt to the current environment you're in. But to me, the most important thing about our organization is making sure that I have the right culture, because I can't control outputs. What I can control is making sure we've got a culture that enables us to take advantage of the market opportunities that enable us to produce the returns and in a balanced way with the risks that we take. So with that, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Why don't we sort of hit off? I want to hit a few topics, but one of the topics here is that we started to go down the path is at the end of the day, we're hearing a lot about artificial intelligence, innovation. Clearly in the investment world, there's a debate between active and passive strategies. And I sit here, run an asset manager wondering, are you guys going to come up with a better mousetrap and do it more efficiently? So, Chris, why don't you start us off? Because I know we have different approaches to internal, external management, but also, how do you think about the changing landscape and relationship between asset owners and asset managers?
Well, I think it's blurring. Many of us are running assets in-house or developing our own portfolios. In our case, we run about 50% of the assets in-house. I know CalPERS runs about 70% of the assets in-house. And I think, the debate about active, passive, particularly in long-only equities, I think that's over. The U.S. market is highly efficient. There's room for activists and a few strategies, but traditional long-only managers have not been outperforming their cost. They outperform the market gross of fees, but they don't outperform net of fees. Fixed income's a different landscape. You're not going to fully replicate, but there again, some of the fixed income strategies, you can do it much more effectively in-house when you have scale. But active management has its place, particularly in private markets and in some of the sophisticated strategies where you want to be long and short. You might want to be able to move around into different areas. So I think if anything, kind of that broad swath of common asset management is going to continue to get compressed. They get a lot of money from retail, and I think retail is even waking up that, in their 401k, the active managers are expensive and they don't outperform. And so we're going to see a compression there, but I think people will continue to move up into taking advantage of things like artificial intelligence and taking advantage of the ability to have so many types of instruments in how you trade. I mean, even our asset classes, the last 2 asset classes we created, were more descriptive of characteristics of securities, not just a specific security like equity or debt. So I think, not surprisingly, the asset management industry is due for disruption and change. It's been pretty stable for a long time. And I think we're going to see that continued disruption. The amount of capital flowing into the world is just enormous. I mean, you look at Hiro, you look at the Japanese, the Chinese, you haven't even seen the high net worth Chinese money be able to invest outside China. So the ability to generate alpha is going to get harder and harder. And I think people, Carrie's a good example of where you're doing stuff in a very unique structure. At our size, it's hard to do, but I think you're going to see small funds be very nimble, and big funds like us kind of have to own the beta of the market, and we're going to do it in the most cost-effective way we can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Actually, I want to contrast that, Carrie, a little bit. In managing, you work with a lot of sort of unique venture-type investments. It's hard to do that in-house. There is an expertise you need. How do you view that challenge or the balance between what you can do internally or not?
For us, it becomes a little bit of a limit of a team, right? So, the thing that's a challenge for me is I have to build a team. There is a nuance, I guess, also with the direct versus indirect on the venture, because we have a bit of a conflict if we're the ones controlling the intellectual property that comes in through our office. For us, though, it does allow us to be small enough to work with our partners, and it's meaningful to them and meaningful to us. And given the mandate we have, which is so much tied to innovation, that's why we've focused on, and we're smaller, so all of it seems to hang together. That's when I look at it, you say, well, what makes us unique? What would be my edge, if you will, and where can I differentiate? And that's what we look at for people who maybe want to access the university and the technologies and find a portal into it. Because if you've ever been on a large land-grant university, it's really hard to navigate and figure out where to go and who to talk to. So that's where we think we could have an advantage. And so whatever anyone's advantage is, size or small or large, to me, that's what you should try to do. And for us, it's around innovation.
And Jagdeep, that's part of what you've done with at UC is you have the access, if you will, to the brain power of the university. You want to comment a little bit on how that influences your?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we all have the same color of money that we're managing, so our competitive advantages are very few. I mean, we're all long-term, so that maybe gives us a competitive advantage. And we're all seeking the same types of assets in our portfolios. So when you look into your own competitive advantages, for us at the University of California, innovation clearly tops the list. And what does that mean? I mean, we spend $5 billion a year on R&D. If we were an organization, that's a lot of R&D in a year. We produce 5 patents a day, the #1 patent producer in the United States. So, and we generally have relied upon a technology transfer and licensing model for royalties. That's brought us in $1 billion over a decade at about $100 million a year. Yet we have produced the #1 drug for prostate cancer, for breast cancer, and a variety of other well-known companies that then we ultimately rely on the entrepreneur to donate a building when they are successful. So over the last 3 years, we've taken stock of our culture of innovation and entrepreneurship at the University of California. And we made a decision that it's time for us to invest in our own competitive advantage. And so what we've done there, and we recognize you were sort of that other half of the state that isn't on Sand Hill Road, But we do invest on Sand Hill Road with the best venture capitalists. But some of our own companies that we already have stock in or equity, we find end up becoming very successful through investments in our funds in the venture capitalists. So we're just connecting a bunch of dots. And how we've connected the dots is we've said, look, let's take $250 million out of our pool of $106 billion and invest that in a venture capital fund that we create. So that's number one. Number two, it became very clear as we spent time with our campuses that they all said innovation is local. So we've decided to create 10 incubators, accelerators, engines of seed capital at our 10 campuses. And each one of them get anywhere between $1 to $3 to $5 million, depending on what they're doing, in a standardized way. And they become an engine for ideas, and that first right of innovation ideas then come to our broader fund. Now, we wanted to make sure that we wouldn't do this internally, because I strongly believe, even though we've got about $100 billion of assets, to keep my team to 30 people on the investment staff. Less is more, because you can be nimble, you can be entrepreneurial, and you can be responsive. In that fashion, we created a third-party fund. We hired Vivek Ranadive, who is a successful entrepreneur that started and sold a company called Tipco and now owns the Sacramento Kings. So he brought the world of media and sports and technology and entertainment to entrepreneurship, and we gave him the UC pipeline to work with. We set it up in a standardized 220 format with an 8% hurdle, so he could hire a world-class team. And in doing that, in essence, it is our engine for funding innovation, but it's done Silicon Valley style, with a huge competitive advantage, which is 5 patents a day, $5 billion of R&D. And they can sit in their offices or scour our universities with the help of 10 funds across our campuses. So we're excited. This is not a 5-year business plan. It doesn't matter whether VC is hot or not. I think this is a 100-year business plan for us. And what I hope is this will change the model to supplement tech transfer and licensing to creating not $1 billion over 10 years, but hopefully tens of billions of dollars over the next 10 years.
I just had a follow-up, because I don't have the $3 billion, but I thought we've probably a few years behind Jagdeep, but following that same model. What we did, and Chris knows, is my friend David Villa at SWIB. WIAF has partnered with SWIB, who has the size and the scale. So we had also, I firmly believe in the outside, keep your team small, have created, in our nascent growing ecosystem. Madison, Wisconsin is not for sure yet the hotbed of where everyone wants to go, especially in about January. But the pension fund itself was looking for ways to invest in their local community and earn a return that was sufficient. It's not an economic development play, so we partnered with the folks over there, and they provided capital. We provide the knowledge and the insight to the university, and so together we've come together in what I think is a great partnership, and we're also in the process of trying to put together an incubator with a fund around it as well. So there are interesting ways to partner with the folks that are in your own neighborhood. Again, you look at your own unique aspects, your assets, and try to make the best of them. So for us, it's the smallness, the contact, the intimate knowledge of the university, and for them, it's their scale and what they can allow us to leverage. So leverage is a big thing in my portfolio. It's literal leverage as well as just leveraging all the partnerships that we can have by reaching out.
Now, it's interesting kind of moving from thinking about how you leverage the universities. I mean, Hiro, when you took over GPIF, there was a big mandate, not just in the reallocation from into risk assets, but the reality is, with such a scale of movement, you had to rethink the asset ownership process.
Absolutely.
Talk a little bit about how you've kind of innovated around such a transformation.
Sure. When I became a CIO, first thing I did is trying to analyze what kind of business model will be suitable for GPIF. Because I actually surprised that talking to the other asset manager, even asset owners, they never really discuss what the suitable business model for their own. So I just decided to spend some time analyzing it. And I concluded there are basically only 3 types of asset owners. One is like Chris Ailman, CalSTRS, CalSTRS, CPIB, Norges, those guys who hire 500, 1,000 people take everything in-house, now about to compete against the asset managers. That's the Group A. Group B is relatively smaller, but probably have like 200 people in staff. But they try to make like a hybrid approach, like some in-house, some external managers. But I found that, realistically speaking, it's very difficult to build a Class A team in-house with that resource and capacity. And a Group C is the much smaller, but hundreds and thousands of asset owners who outsource everything like we do, but they have no leverage or they have no resource to work on negotiate or change the system. So we have decided we are going to become like a Super C. So we will continue to have the external, the outsourcing model, but we are determined to use our weight to affect the investment chain, how we should align our interests with asset managers, and etc. So a couple of points taken from the other panelists. I also have a strong view about the active management. I know the statistically active management for the equity doesn't seem to be proving themselves to create a value to us, but we feel something like responsible, particularly for Japanese equity market, to promote the active investment. Because, by definition, if 100% of investor becomes passive investor, passive management will become very inefficient. Right. So we need to promote active investment to make passive efficient. Okay. So that's one big thesis I believe in. So GPF will continue to use active managers. But for us to continue to use active managers, we have been demanding active manager to give us new proposal of their new business model. Because one thing I was very surprised is, talking to the asset managers, they spend a lot of time analyzing their portfolio company's business model. I wonder how much time they spend on their own business model. Because as you said, as an industry, active management is failing to provide a value to asset owner. So I started negotiating the different fee structure to make alignment much stronger between us and asset manager. And we realized, a lot of big guys tried in the past, but they gave up and decided to take everything in-house. So we have no choice to do that. So we are determined to work out with asset managers. But the very common repercussion I receive when I start discussing the new fee structure is that, you are not even covering my cost. That's a common statement I receive from asset managers. But is there any other industry now consumer pay for cost of producers? The customer only pays for the value added. So we keep telling asset managers, I'm happy to pay up. I have no intention to reduce our fee in absolute terms, but we only pay when you deliver alpha. So those kind of things, misalignment of interest between asset managers and asset owners, we have to spend much more energy to work it out to make it more win-win situation. And then for the other things I've been asking the asset owner, asset manager to give us is about AI. We have to prepare ourselves. This is something I expect. In 5 years' time, let's say 2 active managers come to, see us for business. Yeah. One manager says, we have 300 very experienced analysts working to analyze the companies every day. And the other company says, we have only 2 people, but we spend 30 million on AI every year. So which manager I should pick, right? So even we have to really think how the AI should reshape the business model of asset manager. And also, we have been a bit lazy, in my opinion, to try to work out what's the best alignment of interest between us and asset managers so that, we can give more flexibility or more mandate to the expanded managers. Right? That's what we are working on right now.
You think about it, I like, you're going down the path of your 2 guys and the quantum computing AI, and then
Yeah.
300 analysts. And we're a fundamental shop, fixed income or real estate. I mean, and Chris, can you really replace it? Because whether you do it internally or externally, you're faced with the same issue of how do you afford your research? How do you afford versus
Well, and I think-
technology and technological innovation?
Yeah, what I would point out is I think what you're hearing is that each of us has been very clever in identifying our strengths, de-emphasizing our weaknesses, and playing to our strengths. Jagdeep tapping into the patent flow, Carrie tapping into that research and that capabilities and being nimble. You're tapping in and using your size to an advantage. For us, we're tapping into where it's an efficient market. We're going to do it internally. If it's an active strategy, then you're right, because you got to have the right business model to run active strategies or to be long short. And we're state government. We're the state of California, so it's not a very good business model. You don't have to joke. Think about government. There isn't much that the government business model does very well, regardless of California or anywhere. So, and it's not the right business model for being an asset manager. And so there are things that we'll try to do internally, but then also we know our strengths and weaknesses and things that we'll decide to go external and take advantage of. We're like you, not as huge, but we'll take advantage of our size. I envy the ability to be nimble and to tap into that kind of a deal flow. We've looked at and now Jagdeep and I have talked several times about that venture fund and what they're doing to tap into that flow, because I think it's actually innovation. Since we're all hearing so often that we're going to have a low return environment, it really is going to be that rate of innovation that comes out of the USA that I think helps us get the kind of returns we need to generate in our portfolio. And there are a ton of new ideas we're hearing at this conference alone.
Yeah. I want to pivot a little bit because I think along with innovation, to me, innovation isn't just a new technological idea. It's also the changing attitudes of the consumer, of your clients. Clearly, the elements of ESG, for instance, are becoming more and more important in the corporate world and also in the investing world. And I think it's one thing to invest relative to those principles, but you also have to look at how you either run your business as an owner and an allocator, and how you apply those principles, or how you expect your asset managers to apply those within their own management. And I don't know, I want to maybe start with Jagdeep and your thoughts on how ESG may be impacting the way you run your office.
I landed at 9 and I got a call from the real estate team saying, are you in the office? Because we have a whole bunch of students from Berkeley that have just marched over and they're going to take over your office. So I said, well, I called my COO and said, let's get pizza and coffee. Let's get the police out of there. And let's treat them with total respect and humility, because at the end of the day, they are our customers. That's how I started talking about who we are. And for us, ESG, if I can define it for you, we're an academic institution. We're a university. What do we do every day? We have students that come to learn, and we have faculty that impart knowledge upon them. Fundamentally, we have to teach and we have to listen. That's what we expect from our students. So when they want to teach us about the importance of divesting from fossil fuels, we have to listen. And that engagement with our own students and our other faculty is the cultural aspect of how we engage with our stakeholders on things that are non-investment related. As a result, we believe that we have, I moved here from Alberta 3 years ago. Oil was the farthest thing from my mind in terms of sustainability when I took the job in California. But coming here, I've realized it's a very important topic. And coincidentally, in the last 3 years, it has become a very important topic for any one of us on the table. So I think there's two camps of CIOs. There's those that say I've got a fiduciary responsibility to maximize return at some balance of risk. And then there are others that say, you know what, risks include being a long-term investor and considering the importance of climate change, environmental issues, social unrest, bad governance practices. And you can name companies day in and day out that are not good actors. And if they're in your 5,000 companies in your portfolio, you've got a problem because it impacts financial returns. So we've embraced two things. A, listening to our customers, because we cannot know at all times what all the issues are, and that's the education process for us. And then engaging with them to make sure that as we make decisions going forward, we are careful about considering what things we want to keep or not keep. We don't divest by policy. We have sold coal. We have sold private prisons. We have sold North Dakota pipelines. We have sold Sunoco Logistics. And we have sold over $350 million in our fossil fuel holdings. And by doing all of that, we've done it because we've explained it as risk management. And we don't do it to grab a headline, even though that tends to make local headlines. But the reality of it is it's just a constant de-risking as a long-term investor. So I think this is an issue that is at the heart of everything we do. And it's something we all need to embrace in a critical way in our risk management capabilities.
Two quick things I want to jump in agreement with Jagdeep. To us, it's really just long-term business risk. Everybody's getting really hung up on the letters ESG, impact investing. It really is just managing long-term business risks and repeating that return over and over. But the challenge with divestment, part of what's going through my mind is I can imagine when all the students are tweeting out that if you go to the UC investment office, you get free pizza. You may have a line out there, a protester. Good for you for doing that. I think that's cool.
Good pizza.
Good yeah, good for you for doing that. But we've got to educate all of these people. They're very passionate about their issue. We get it. But divestment, for a social reason, has not solved a problem. Everybody looks back even to South Africa in the 80s. There also was a sports boycott. There was a banking boycott. There were other global events that went on. There's too much capital in the world. So a U.S. boycott of something isn't going to affect a company. There's other money that's going to come in. But divestment is an investment decision. And it's a risk mitigation decision, because divestment by its nature just means you're selling something. You're choosing not to invest or to sell something because you think it's a bigger risk. And a lot of our funds have done divestments as a risk tool. We've done 5 of them, and they have not brought about any social change at all. And that's what I think. Not enough people are doing academic research on it. It's just a lovely thought, and it gives people a cause, so we get the protests. And we have people at every meeting that show up. And instead of us being able to engage and bring about change in the companies, we're spending all of our time focused on that issue, which to me is, you can tell, there's a source of frustration. But I think we're better having a voice in the discussion of trying to bring about change. Because long term, we got to make money, like you said, over 100 years, intergenerational money. We don't care about quarterly earnings. We don't care about even the next 2 or 3 years. We care about long-term operational risks to a company. We had an asset owner breakfast on Tuesday morning, and one fund got up and said, yeah, but I get that Coca-Cola should care about water because it's a really important part of their process, but they should only care about it to that point. And the ESG people said, but exactly, it's a long-term business risk. They have to care about their availability of clean water, and they can't just use it up and then try and figure out how to make Coke out of air. So it's a business risk, and people get too much hung up in this fiduciary debate about whether it's in or out. Deep value investors, private equity investors, fixed income credit investors, they look at all these kinds of risks all the time. They just never labeled them into that term.
Hiro, how do you view that? Obviously, coming from Japan and having to put so much to work, how are you going to manage that risk across
ESG risk.
1.4?
Well, we have been really pushing ESG through our investment chain for the following reason. We conceptually believe in that what we have been working as a shareholder with the company, that is meaningful only when whole capital market is sustainable and stable. Because as we discussed, that given our size, we are more subject to market beta rather than the individual alpha created by managers. So we have to make sure capital market or financial system is sustainable. And for the financial system to be sustainable, social systems has to be sustainable. And for the social system to be sustainable, environment has to be sustainable. So that's a big picture we have. And we keep telling the people that ESG is our the very important factors for our investment decision, and that we expect all our asset managers to integrate ESG factors in their investment decision-making process. That's one thing. And I started serving on a board of PRI from this year, and listening to their discussion, I was also annoyed as you did. There are so many like a buzzword flying, the impact investment and responsible investment and the sustainability, inclusiveness, blah, blah, blah. So I keep saying to people that, all the streams or narrow streams of goodwill initiatives have to make a big river to make the system, change into the right direction. So I'm trying to just use all those words intentionally interchangeably, okay, so that people, in the end, finally agree that they are talking about the same value. So that's the approach we're making. And the Corporate Governance Stewardship Code, which the Japanese government introduced last year, is really trying to dictate how the shareholder should work with the asset creator.
Right.
But we need to make sure, their activity is not the sole attributes of our performance. So, we have a lot of debate about whether it's against fiduciary duty, blah, 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 but we're still keeping it at that discussion very tight. And the one more thing I would like to say is that, one of the biggest, the contributions made by Kofi Annan or PRI when they came up with this ESG concept is, in the past, people who are active in environment or social issues, they are active in their own world. And the people who are active in corporate governance, they are only interested in a commercial aspect of the activities. So that this ESG things may be just a coincidence, but they managed to put those people together so that people are having those environment issues in their activities, have to now pay attention to the commercial feasibility of their activities. And the people has been working on the corporate governance, meaning like how to improve the company's productivity or like a return to the shareholder, now have to pay attention to those issues. So I think that directionally speaking, that we are moving into the same direction, but we need to work it out. I mean, just get rid of all those like a small technical debate, whether it's against the fiduciary duty. I have no idea which country's law they are talking about. And on the other hand, they are talking about whether it will affect the small return, and which is very easy to replace by anyway. So it's just a conceptual debate we need to win, first of all. Yeah. But I think that we are getting a lot of traction at the moment, and at least for any asset manager to be selected or receive a business from us, have to give us, tell us how they integrate their ESG into their investment decision. We don't dictate how, but we just need to understand how they want to do it.
Yeah. So ultimately, there's got to be a process.
Right. Yeah.
So,
sure.
We're talking here about new frontiers, right? And I personally think if we go beyond just the investment decision-making issue, we all have kids. I've got a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old. And what are the conversations you're having with your kids today? And what are they concerned about? They're concerned about these types of things, about their future generation. And they're more passionate about it than probably any one of us ever have been or may be. And in listening to them, those are the people we're hiring.
Yeah.
We are long-term investors. This is not a 5-year game. This is a 20, 40, 50-year game. Our asset managers are hiring the same incredible talent coming out of our universities. What does that mean? That means that they care about two things. One, they care about the world they're going to live in, and they care about being cool and technologically savvy. Yeah. That's where innovation and this notion of caring about values that affect their life in the future matter. And so even if we have these labels, at the very least, what it does, by embracing and learning and understanding them, it demonstrates to our talent and our employees that these things matter to us, and therefore it actually helps with attracting new talent and potentially even retaining talent in a way that differentiates us. Because as we all know sitting on the stage here, we can talk about the fact that we might be a government institution or we might be in Japan and it's very hard to hire good people. But you know what? It is, in today's day and age, some of the younger talent don't necessarily care about what they get paid. They care about the difference they can make to their society and their community. And that's where we have an edge that far exceeds any asset manager in this room.
I agree with that, and I'm going to turn to Carrie. But do you find, as you go up the chain, we ultimately report to someone, whether you're the manager, working for the asset owner or the asset owner's boards. I mean, Carrie, how does that come into play when you're dealing with your stakeholders at Wisconsin, this discussion of ESG?
Mostly I was thinking I've been very remiss because we haven't really focused on it, quite honestly. It hasn't been something that's come up with my constituency, given that we're not the UW Foundation. But that said, this past week, one of my staff sent me a notice there was a newspaper article about a group on campus that had taken a vote trying to have the UW Foundation take an action on a social issue. And he sent it to me, and I said, this really is something we need to start thinking about. And originally came back and said, well, they're talking about the foundation. I'm like, but no, it is something that hasn't been on our radar, but it should be. When I was looking at the question, as I knew we were going to kind of talk about the topic, it kind of came down to then the question of implementation. The structure of what I run, most of my market exposures is gotten through futures. So I'm not directly investing in many companies. And where I do have active management, and perhaps people are investing in companies, that's in a hedge fund structure where it's long short, where to Chris's point, perhaps that company that has a lot of business risk is actually being shorted. I can't tell you I know the answer, but I think that if you told me now I have to, if we got forced into some type of a structure where I was divesting from coal, I can't efficiently get, the S&P 500 future that has that. And that kind of craters my whole investment strategy. And my whole investment strategy has worked very well for the foundation. So the balance between, my goal is to sort of help research and how to, as I've said, I haven't had the question or the discussion. I look forward to it. But that's definitely something I have to weigh, which is that change, which fundamentally makes me change what I do, and then perhaps results in a lower return or some kind of, because I can't implement the same way, I can't deploy as much capital into active management now because I have to go into some customized ETF, therefore I can't use that capital for an overlay. That has an impact. And the question is, which impact is more important? Do you want that researcher to get that additional $2 million for their lab to continue to do the research on some major problem? I don't have an answer, so.
Here.
Two things. One thing is when we had the GC Mac breakfast yesterday, Mike said something really interesting and interesting to me, which when we are discussing about ESG, what he said is, anyway, whatever the other asset owner says, young millennium doesn't want to work for the company which is against ESG. Right, so the young people wouldn't go into work for those kind of companies who are doing something against those kind of ESG principles. So that's something, that tells us something. For the business to be sustainable, they have to attract the old young talents. So that's one way to look at it. And second is that talking about the divestment. We also had some discussion about divestment, but we need to discuss divestment because somebody put that in a portfolio in the first place, which is index vendors. So we came to realize index vendors sometimes has much more powerful influence over what we own than CIOs, right? So we recently, requested a proposal for ESG indices for Japanese equities, and through that due diligence, we came to realize people paid little attention to how the index vendors are governed. So we went on to the on-site due diligence at the several index vendors to see how they have, what their own corporate governance, and which the committee or external committee dictates on those kind of controversial names, and we found it actually hasn't been they paid enough attention to. So there are a couple of the loose ends in this whole investment chain, And index vendor is one of the loose end, which I think that we, as a group, asset owners should pay more attention to.
Yes, one question to wrap up the ESG, because I know we're going short on time. And I agree with all that's being said here, especially about the fact that our customers, our employees, society's looking for action in a positive direction around environmental issues and social issues. But are we going to be patient enough to allow change? And I give an example of, are you going to let an ExxonMobil pursue its change over time? If all of a sudden there is no capital flowing to fossil type companies, we're not able to produce enough Teslas to replace all the cars yet.
No.
So how do you balance that over time if you're providing capital to these companies?
Well, the one thing I'll jump in is it's not necessarily black and white, but there is that, and I get exposed to a very strong socialist view that we should tell the market or force the market to react. I'm a capitalist. I'm an investment person. So my focus is the market will take advantage. And I'm active in a lot of the index vendors, and I agree they could be better. But one of the things about the broad market is if you applied a tax. So companies pay a tax to dispose of their physical waste. They pay a fee to dispose of their water waste. They don't pay any fee to dispose of their gaseous waste. We just assume the atmosphere is unlimited. If you could impose a tax on carbon emissions, the market would regulate and it would change itself. And companies that, people go back and they say, well, gosh, you got to divest because, in the 1920s or the late 19-teens, the biggest problem was horse manure. Because there were so many horses, and look at the buggy whip manufacturers that went out of business. The problem is back then, all those people could make. They couldn't convert over and make leather car seats, but you know that today they would in a flash, and the company would survive, but now in a different marketplace. So the market will take advantage of that. Look at the valuation of coal companies that just dropped down through the floor. If you're an active manager, then you're going to make those decisions. But when we're going to own the broad market, we're going to be exposed, but the market will ebb and flow, and I think take care of that. And ExxonMobil is looking at the fact that oil isn't unlimited. Everybody loves to hate them, but there are a lot of other oil companies that understand what's material, and are they energy companies or are they an oil company? Right. My last point, this gets back to corporate governance. Think back in the early 1980s, the GM board and the Toyota board were off brainstorming. Toyota said, you know what, we're out of the oil embargo, but let's think about new technology and new ways to power engines, and started messing around with hybrids. GM said, we're out of the oil embargo, gas is cheap, let's build big, massive SUVs because that's what people want. Initially, they did want that, but now let's look forward to who is surviving today and who's barely hanging on and who is surviving. So we want corporate boards to be thinking decades ahead and management to be thinking decades ahead. And I think, it's a view that I think the market will correct, and government can come in and make regulations, but I don't think we as asset owners want to come in and tell people how to operate and to force change.
Right.
No, I think the market should be patient because we are long-term capital anyway, and also the sudden change to particular sector could create the instability in the social environment. So as I explained, like the concentric circle, the concept. If some of the industry is so critical to some particular part of the country, right, or let's say in Southeast Asia, they have to use coal because that's cheap and they can, they can take it almost for free. So we cannot tell those people to use nuclear or some clean energy or solar power, but we just need to make sure to incentivize them to use the best-in-class technology to at least minimize emission, right, or developed country try to shift towards it, so that as a whole, the global environment will be kept as good as it can. So I think we should be patient on a case-by-case basis, but we just pay more attention to what's going to happen, right, as a whole. Yeah.
Right. Well, maybe just to we only have a few minutes left. I'll ask our panel maybe just for some closing comments on maybe the one idea or thought that you have relative to the changing frontier of your business. We'll start with Jagdeep.
It's fascinating. How much time have we spent talking about ESG versus anything else, which in the scheme of new frontiers? So that shows you it's certainly on top of mind. And I would just add one point that, the Deputy Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia has laid out a vision 2030. Saudi Arabia is looking to diversify its own economy. If they happen to be the largest owner of what we call fossil fuels, and they're thinking about diversifying their economy, it makes sense for any one of us to think about how we want to diversify our energy holdings. In that context, as an energy investor, energy is not going away from our portfolios anytime soon. We need to have a 2030 plan of an evolving energy mix. So I say number one point for me is that think about an evolving energy mix in your makeup of your portfolios. The most exciting thing, I think, regardless of the backdrop of politics or geopolitics, is the fact that you look back 10 years and the world we live in today, we did not imagine. You look forward 10 years, the world we will be living in, or our children, or our colleagues, and our students, is one that is even going to be more fantastic. We're going to come close to cures for cancer. We're going to come closer to finding new technological solutions to do things. We will innovate in the area of energy. We will create new solutions that we will talk about here in 2030. And that's what I think as investors is one of the most exciting things, is to embrace change, adapt, and then try and find ways to look for those gems that might be investment opportunities early on and ride them as a long-term investor, because that ultimately is our advantage, is being patient.
Great. Carrie?
Because I don't have much more on top of what
UC graduate?
what Jagdeep had to say. I think one of the things that is probably for all investors to keep in mind is just to focus on, we all get peer risk is one of those things. And, 12 years ago, we took a lot of peer risk when we changed our investment strategy. It's worked out very well for our foundation. And I think to the extent that everyone focuses on what it is your mission is, whether you're trying to provide money for your beneficiaries, and the best way to do that and not worry so much about what everyone else is doing. And it's not about return. My portfolio is built about managing risk. Returns are going to be what they're going to be. And if I can run a diversified portfolio that consistently provides the capital that my beneficiaries need, then I feel like I've done my job. At the same time as building up a team that's embracing change, looking for innovation, always, what is the new way to do it? Because it's so easy to become complacent, especially when you're these 100-year-old organizations. So those would be my points.
Hiro, final thoughts?
Well, we have a big fund, but we have much less flexibility, compared to the other asset owners. So we are determined to continue to work on optimization of the relationship between asset owner and asset managers. And we are going to also approach all the key players which, in this investment chain. So what I mentioned, like index vendors or like a proxy boarding, recommendation company, those people. We really wanted to work with those guys to find the optimal outsourcing structure. So that's our focus is going forward.
Great. Chris, final thoughts?
I just will wrap up with, I've been in this business a long time. It is true, when I started in this business, I had hair. And what amazes me is back then we had so much in common. Everybody was, are you 70-30 or 80-20? It was very, very small, narrow differences. Fast forward to today, and I'm amazed at how different our portfolios are. Yet, like you saw here, we still have a ton of things in common because we're long-term investors. But when you add in just the state pension plans and all the endowments and the global plans, we're all definitely doing it in a wide variety of ways. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this rolls out in the future.
Well, I want to thank the panelists. You made my job easy. And I learned a lot from you, and thank everybody for attending, and have a great day. Thank you.